I tend to retreat into the past on this channel, as the future is always arriving and the world is constantly changing. The irony in that is observable though, as I have a fondness for an era of constant, rapid change. You can clearly see how many of my videos are associated with that era. The advent of the World Wide Web, the introduction of 3D polygonal graphics in video games, and a race in technology creating new ways to experience games. Despite that, those ever-changing times were, for me, the simplest, because I was at an age through those years that I could just enjoy existing during that race in technology, without any responsibilities to worry about. The Nintendo DS felt like it was never far away from me throughout that time period, and it felt like it existed through nearly the entirety of that technological race. It enjoyed a long life cycle, it was ahead of its time in many ways, and it eventually lost relevance during the rise of smartphones. But it enabled new and exciting ways of designing games. The DS as well as the DSi were both incredibly important to me, and represent the simplest times in my life. Let's step back in time for a moment and revisit an ironically simpler time amidst constant evolution and change. I'm Liam Triforce, and this is a video about the Nintendo DS. The DS began development in 2002, not long after the release of the GameCube and Game Boy Advance. The idea allegedly came from former president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi. Apparently he came up with the idea for a dual-screen console himself, and the company ran with it. It was officially announced in early 2004, with Iwata promoting its reinvention of how people played games, just as he would later do with the Wii. Originally, however, it was envisioned as a third pillar, complementing the GameCube and GBA. Before the DS was released, Yamauchi was quoted as saying, "If the DS succeeds, we will rise to heaven, but if it fails, we will sink to hell." Which is a little dramatic, but the GameCube wasn't doing so well at the time. Ultimately, the DS succeeded the Game Boy Advance, and went on to complement the Wii during Nintendo's Blue Ocean strategy, something that set themselves apart from their competition during the 7th generation. Satoru Iwata led the charge on that philosophy, hoping that their strategy would introduce video games to a broad audience. Nintendo's handhelds traditionally enjoyed strong sales, but the DS was on another level. Though the Nintendo Switch will likely surpass it someday, the DS is Nintendo's best-selling system. After combined sales of every model in the DS family, it sold 154 million units as of 2016. So yeah, I think it's safe to say they rose to heaven. Let's briefly go over the features of the DS and the included firmware. The Nintendo DS had all the buttons of a Super Nintendo controller and 2 screens, with the bottom screen being touch-sensitive, and you could interact with it with the included stylus pen or your finger if you're in the heat of an action game, or a coin or whatever else you had lying around. Sometimes you had to improvise if you couldn't find your stylus. It also had a built-in microphone, with certain games asking you to say certain phrases into it, like calling your dog's name in Nintendogs or shouting "Objection!" in Ace Attorney. It could also be used for easy voice chat, though the voice chat I remember being pretty crusty. Most games wanted you to blow into the microphone whenever it would use it, which I always found to be incredibly gimmicky, and it's probably the only feature that DS games utilized that I don't miss. The system was released in 2004 in 6 colors, and it adopted the clamshell design from the Game Boy Advance SP. When closed, the DS goes into sleep mode, conserving battery while keeping your game running in the background. Every DS and DS Lite came with the ability to play Game Boy Advance games, with some DS games even using the cartridge slot for additional accessories. It also allowed you to set your system name, which would be displayed in local multiplayer games, your favorite color, birthday, and the date and time. You could also set an alarm clock, which was one of the loudest and most obnoxious alarms I've ever used. That is to say, it did its job very well. The DS also allowed you to download software from other players in order to play multiplayer, which was a novel way of making multiplayer across multiple systems accessible. Granted, the other players had to download a smaller, more restricted version of the software in order to play, so not all of the levels in Mario Kart DS would be playable, for example, but it still made portable games viable as a multiplayer option at the time. You could also use DS Download Play to download demos from download stations, and later on the Nintendo channel on the Wii, among other things. These demos did not require a constant wireless connection to another system, so you could take it with you and keep it loaded on your DS until you turned it off, which I did multiple times because I was a child and I took what I could get. There was also PictoChat, which allowed you to write and draw messages and send them to any DS systems that happened to be nearby and logged into one of the 4 chat rooms. Really, this was just a diversion in case you didn't have anything else to play with your friends, but it was still fun. You could even show off that you had a DSi when talking to filthy DS and DS Lite peasants by drawing with a rainbow pen and sending a different message chime. I do have some fond memories of trying to find people on PictoChat whenever I'd bring my DS on vacation, or even when sitting in the backseat of the car while driving on the highway. Granted, it wouldn't maintain a connection for very long, but it was still cool when it happened. PictoChat was representative of something that I remember the Nintendo DS fondly for. It brought people together, and you'll see the many ways it was able to do that as we go through its history. The Nintendo DS was home to several fully fledged entries in established franchises, and they took advantage of the technical capabilities of the system, the ability to bring people together, and the distinct features of the DS itself to create new ways of experiencing games. These philosophies aligned with Iwata's Blue Ocean strategy, and firmly positioned the DS as a companion to the Wii, as it was both accessible to those that wouldn't normally play video games, and allowed for new kinds of games to be created by designers. A lot of people tend to think that DS stands for dual screen, which, yeah, that's a logical conclusion, but it actually stands for Developer's System, according to Nintendo themselves, as it, quote, gives game creators brand new tools which will lead to more innovative games for the world's players. From here, we'll be looking into how a handful of DS games managed to do these things. Please understand that in the interest of length, I won't be able to mention everyone's favorite DS games. I primarily want to focus on the clever ways developers utilize the Nintendo DS, and the memories we all share with the console itself. The game that headlined the system's launch was actually a remake of a Mario game, Super Mario 64 DS, just as the Game Boy Advance had a remake of Super Mario Bros. 2 at launch. I've already talked about this game in my retrospective on Mario 64, so I'll give a brief summary of what the remake brought to the table, and why it was so novel as a DS game. You begin the game not as Mario, but as Yoshi, and you eventually gain the ability to play as Mario, Luigi, and Wario through solving new and expanded mysteries around the castle. The nature of this game expanded on the aura of mystery surrounding the original game, even adding new power stars to find. It's not exactly the same game as before, with each character having their own specific applications. 64DS was also a great technical showcase for what was possible on the DS in terms of graphics, as it proved that fully 3D games were possible. I was a big fan of the new textures and art design across each level, especially the skyboxes, which were both faithful and unique in their own right. 64DS deliberately chose to go for a hand-painted look for its skyboxes, which makes Wet Dry World look slightly less unsettling, though it still used the same photo reference. It may not have had the most ideal control scheme for a game that was designed around an analog stick, but it still holds a special place in the hearts of many, with some first experiencing Mario 64 on the DS. It essentially created its own generation of fans obsessed with its many secrets and rumors, and for that reason I felt it was a worthwhile remake. In terms of DS-exclusive gameplay features, the bottom screen allows you to view a map of each level, complete with the location of the star, and you could hang out in the rec room and play some minigames whenever you wanted a break. These minigames were what I remembered most fondly from the game, particularly because a few of them were carried over to New Super Mario Bros. With multiplayer. So on top of the incredibly fun assortment of single-player minigames that I used to play over and over for high scores, you could also play some of those minigames with friends and compete to see who was the best. My favorites were the bomb sorting minigame that becomes gradually more chaotic, the slingshot one that asks you to hit rows of bombs for score multipliers, the bullet hell minigame that feels like you're dodging cheese puffs from Bowser, this trampoline minigame where you have to draw and angle your trampolines correctly for the Marios to reach the other side, and of course, the one where you have to find the characters in the wanted posters. I am not joking when I say that I could play this minigame for an hour and still not get tired of it. It gets much more difficult as it goes on, and the rush of being able to spot someone amidst a crowd of characters placed in patterns is something I lived for when I was younger. It's still an excellent minigame today, and I honestly don't mind popping the game in and playing it again sometimes. It also helps that New Super Mario Bros. Is still a pretty fun game for what it's worth. I don't think it necessarily did anything revolutionary in terms of designing a Mario game, other than the visual style it went for, of which I was a big fan, at least until the sequels came along. But Mario's added moves from the 3D games and the level design both made New Super Mario Bros. Pretty refreshing at the time. It did end up spawning a 2D Mario sub-series that eventually grew stale, but that's not really this game's fault on its own. It was fun. If anything, it had more to do with the fact that it sold over 30 million freaking copies. So there you go. I still love the minigames to death, though. There were also a handful of gambling minigames for some reason, and to this day I'm still not sure why or how these made it in. You had poker, blackjack, roulette, and a few others, all fully functional and allowing you to bet a handful of coins given to you. There was even a slot machine minigame. Straight up slots in a Mario game. If this game got some kids addicted to gambling when they grew up, somehow I would not be surprised, because I played these minigames for an alarming amount of time while recording. Okay, that's a little hyperbolic, but even my friends and I played blackjack and poker for a while against one another, which had us all scanning each other's faces to see if any of us were bluffing. Not only are a lot of these minigames extremely addictive and fun to play, but the nature of them meant that you could play them quickly wherever you were, even putting the DS to sleep when you were in the middle of them, which is perfect for when you're on the go. Keep in mind, this was a handful of years before everyone would have a smartphone in their pocket, so this was welcome. Not to mention, they're really well designed and don't try to get your money all the time. Well, your actual money anyway. Moving on, however, let's talk about the game that I think made Nintendo realize that the DS was more than just a third pillar in their console strategy. Mario Kart DS. I recorded a lot of this game while working on this video simply because I had a hard time putting it down. It's hard to overstate just how cool it was to have a proper, three-dimensional Mario Kart entry that built on its predecessors, all playable on the go. Rather than just featuring the traditional 4 cups, the game was the first to include 4 additional cups composed of courses from previous games. The controls were tight, the drifting and snaking were both satisfying and deep, you had a plethora of vehicles to choose from, you could unlock Rob the Robot, and it even featured a mission mode that I feel inspired the tournaments of Mario Kart Wii, in which you would have to complete a specific objective and get at least 1 star, the rank above A rank, in every course to unlock a boss fight. Yeah, boss fights in a Mario Kart game. And they play to this game's strengths, while also adapting ideas from previous Mario games. They aren't just gimmicks, and are a great complement to the already excellent original courses. In terms of single-player Mario Kart, this is how you do it. Unlockable karts and characters earned through skill, and the mission mode is perfect for portability. And when it comes to the track selection, I mean, dude. This game introduced Waluigi Pinball, Tick-Tock Clock, Yoshi Falls, Delfino Square, Peach Gardens. So many great tracks, on top of the awesome ones from older games. The multiplayer allowed for both DS download play and multi-card play. And although download play limited everyone to a selection of 8 courses and 3 battle arenas, if everyone in the room owned the game, which was extremely likely as the game sold 23 million units worldwide, up to 8 players could race on all 32 courses, and battle across every mode and course. It was simple to set up, yet just as robust as the home console Mario Kart games at the time. And, after remaining staunchly against an online strategy with the GameCube, the team behind Mario Kart DS decided that the time was right for online multiplayer. Mario Kart DS became the very first game to feature Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, and although it was limited to 4 players, there was no battle mode, and only a handful of courses were playable, online races definitely separated the men from the boys, so to speak. While not entirely stable, it was fun to race not just against random strangers that happen to be pros at the game, but also friends that live far away. Back then, Mario Kart DS was mind-blowing for me. While you might argue that its sequels quickly rendered this game obsolete, I still think Mario Kart DS's balancing, features, and track selection still make it a worthwhile game in the series today. Moving from one major franchise to another, we have Generation 4 and 5 of Pokémon. At this point in history, Pokémon was guaranteed to release on every handheld Nintendo console, but the DS Pokémon games, particularly Gen 4, represent a time where I was obsessed with Pokémon. Whether it be the games, the trading card game, the anime, or any form of media, I was there. We were introduced to this generation through Pokémon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. The graphical style combined both the pixel art of the previous games and simplistic 3D models to give the world of the game depth, and seamlessly blend with the look of previous games, a look that was expanded on dramatically in black and white. The addition of online functionality meant that trading and battling with friends became much easier. You could receive gifts from Nintendo during events, and Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum were even cross-compatible with Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the Gen 2 remakes. In short, Pokemon thrived on the DS, and so many people have played these games and love them that I don't feel like I need to say a whole lot here. Oh, and I missed the underground bases. They were a fun diversion, and I loved playing Capture the Flag and setting up traps down here. One thing I'll point out is just how natural it felt to have the battle commands on the bottom screen. You could navigate them with buttons if you wanted to, but the convenience of being able to navigate the menu by tapping the screen made gameplay in a lot of menu-heavy games a lot smoother. Take the Ace Attorney series, for example. Rather than having to scroll through menus with the D-pad, you can just tap the option you want. You can investigate for evidence and scroll through the court record with ease. The touchscreen is often an ever-present, seamless, yet optional way of interfacing with games on the system. Ace Attorney may have originally been a Game Boy Advance trilogy in Japan, but when it came to the West, I think it redefined what could make for a great game. It was a visual novel through and through, but the problem-solving made the trial sequences these adrenaline-fueled rushes that feel amazing once you put the pieces together on your own, untangling a web of lies and discovering the truth. I credit them with not just popularizing visual novels in the West, but also proving that they could be a viable method of creating brilliant gameplay scenarios as well, with solid writing and attention to detail that contributes directly to your own ability to prove your clients innocent. 999, the first game in what eventually became the Zero Escape series, is another fantastic example of the DS being great for visual novels, all the while presenting you with new ways in which the genre could be experienced. You've got all of the text on the bottom screen describing scenarios thoroughly, all the while you have full-size illustrations on the top screen. As you attempt to escape each area, you have to tap around to find things, rotate objects, etc. The manner in which you interact with the game reminds me a lot of point-and-click adventure games, a genre that also thrived on the DS. Basically, if there were a game that worked well with a cursor on a computer, it translated beautifully to the touch-based controls of the DS. While the Wii's pointer controls did make this kind of gameplay possible as well, they paled in comparison to the organic feeling of simply touching the screen with a stylus. To demonstrate this, let's take a look at Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. The game was directed by the same person that directed the original Ace Attorney trilogy, Shu Takumi. You control Sissel by dragging his spirit to different objects and possessing them, and by interacting with them you can slowly begin to unravel the puzzles laid before you, and alter the fates of those that have just passed away. An extremely novel concept for a puzzle game, and something that just feels natural to control with a stylus. And as an aside, the graphical style they went for was genius. It conforms to the hardware constraints of the DS, while still brimming with style, and evocative of old-school PC games like Another World. I couldn't get enough of this when I first saw it. The DS's stylus controls didn't just benefit existing genres by making them easier to play, though. It also invited entirely new ways of designing games in those genres. Take, for example, Elite Beat Agents. This was one of the most frequently recommended games when I asked about DS games on social media, and I'd heard about it beforehand. It is a westernized take on the Ouendan series, being absolutely ridiculous and having a bunch of English-speaking songs in its soundtrack instead of Japanese ones. Though I'd heard about it, I had no idea how it played. And upon playing the first level, I came to realize that it's literally just Osu, and Elite Beat Agents turned me into an Osu player. Okay, more accurately, this series served as the inspiration for that game, with the name Osu being derived from the Japanese title of the first Ouendan game. Seriously though, this game is fantastic, and it thrives thanks to the touchscreen. I've tried playing Osu with a mouse, and it doesn't even compare to the feeling of using a stylus. As you're tapping and dragging your stylus frantically, you're playing along to the rhythm of a pretty awesome soundtrack that both feels representative of the era it was released in, as well as adapting some classic songs that are a welcome treat to hear. Most of the scenarios are hilarious to play through, and they reward you for playing well with more ideal outcomes for the characters. Then, in the middle of the game, they throw you this emotional Christmas level about a little girl's father that passed away, set to Chicago's You're the Inspiration. I can't believe this game exists. It also gets extremely difficult by the end, which is welcome, but it made my hands shake and cramp as I attempted to beat the final level. I will never hear the Rolling Stones' Jumping Jack Flash the same way again. But let's reel things in a bit. Let's play a simpler rhythm game, something that anyone can enjoy. This is Rhythm Heaven, a game that happens to be one of my all-time favorites. The entirety of this game is controlled through simplistic tapping, rubbing, and flicking motions on the touchscreen. And yet the minigames breathe so much life into those simplistic controls through both their presentation and how the visuals and wacky concepts lend themselves to distinct rhythmic patterns across multiple musical genres. Trying to achieve perfection in each minigame proved to be an obsession of mine. I genuinely cannot stress just how inventive and fun the Rhythm Heaven games are. And while I think the others are brilliant, I specifically love what staying in rhythm with the stylus lends to the fun of this game. That and the simplicity of the control scheme made it appealing to a broad audience. It made sense that this game would be so varied and wild because a lot of the people behind it, including legendary artist Ko Takeuchi and designer-programmer Kazuyoshi Osawa, worked on the WarioWare series. WarioWare had a couple of entries on the DS, and I believe the stylus makes them incredibly accessible to even people who are unfamiliar with video games. The first, WarioWare Touched, was a good demonstration of what could be possible with touch controls in a WarioWare game, but WarioWare DIY opened Pandora's box and let players design their own microgames and allowed them to share them over the internet, inviting seemingly endless possibilities for both the touch controls and WarioWare as a concept. You could play built-in microgames created by the developers, all themed to each character, of course, but you could also download games to your save file and play all of them in a customized blend. You could create whatever you could think of, as well as play anything from the minds of anyone who decided to create things. It was brilliant. And it's a shame that the community of microgames seems to have been lost to time. I think some of them have been preserved, and the microgames created by notable people are still playable, but this game was a triumph not just for WarioWare, but also as a tool for enabling creativity in people that play games. And I believe the control scheme and user interface had a lot to do with that. Keep that in mind for later in this video, by the way. An unexpected genre to be reinvented on the DS was first-person shooters. Much like Metroid Prime 3 on the Wii, Metroid Prime Hunters aimed to solve a similar problem in designing an FPS game for a control scheme that at first glance seems ill-fitted for it. But Metroid Prime Hunters wouldn't be developed by Retro Studios. It was instead developed by Nintendo Software Technology, known for Mario vs. Donkey Kong and more recently, F-Zero 99. This was probably their most ambitious project, or at the very least the most ambitious project that actually saw the light of day. Metroid Prime Hunters' single-player campaign was still a Metroid game through and through, even introducing the ability to travel to different planets before Metroid Prime 3 did. You move Samus with the D-pad or face buttons with your non-dominant hand, and look around using your dominant hand with the stylus. This is pretty much the most optimal way you could possibly control a first-person game on the DS, and for the accuracy the touchscreen affords you over an analog stick without aim assist, I have to commend them for their efforts. The hand cramps unfortunately made the game annoying to play. I don't think our hands and fingers are meant to move and bend the way this game asks them to. The game is also extremely graphically impressive for a DS game, as was Metroid Prime for a GameCube game, essentially setting the standard for what was possible with realistic 3D graphics on the DS. While the campaign is cool, the game's major selling point was its multiplayer, even being the central focus of the first Hunt demo that was included with DS systems at the system's launch. You had the option to play as the multiple hunters you run into throughout the game, each with their own unique abilities, weapons, and heads-up display, in 4-player local and online multiplayer deathmatches. This is essentially where the game transformed into Quake or Half-Life Deathmatch, and with every player being forced to acclimate to this control scheme, it created a unique environment where every player had to master turning and aiming within the confines of a Nintendo DS. It was awesome, and it even had voice chat and online leaderboards if you were willing to take it more seriously. I'll save my further thoughts on the game for a full video, but this control scheme quickly became the standard for all first-person games on the DS. And for some reason, there were quite a few of them. Call of Duty had DS ports for some reason, and I remember playing the Zombies mode on there a few times with a friend. The most creative and impressive use of the perspective I've seen on the DS was in Dementium the Ward. The game utilizes the Doom 3 technique of having you switch between your flashlight and your weapon to trade off your defensive option for visibility. and this low visibility enables both that gameplay dynamic as well as great performance. The game runs at 60 frames per second. Yeah, a fully 3D first-person game running at 60 frames per second on a Nintendo DS. That is an accomplishment. It isn't a revolutionary game or anything, and it has a fairly linear and obvious sense of progression and an unforgiving distance between save points. But it is pretty cool for its tense gameplay and atmosphere, and the use of the DS's features, like being able to take notes in your notebook while exploring the hospital to solve puzzles. Having two screens also meant certain games were just more enjoyable on the DS in terms of quality of life changes. You could get the heads-up display out of the way and put it all on the bottom screen, display a map, or whatever developers felt was necessary to make the gameplay the core focus. Super Princess Peach, for example, made it so that the bottom screen was used to activate Peach's vibes, essentially giving you 4 extra buttons to press all clustered near the corners of the screen, right next to the D-pad and face buttons. Mario Kart DS had an adjustable map on the bottom screen, allowing you to zoom in or out to keep track of the action, while the top screen only showed you the most important information. Kirby Superstar Ultra had absolutely no HUD elements on the top screen, putting it all on the bottom and giving you a clear view of the visuals and gameplay. Different games had different needs, but I feel that nearly all of them almost certainly benefited from being able to separate information to different screens. Also, dual screen cutscenes. These were cool ways of showing multiple angles and vertical images when presenting story beats. Other games used the two screens to present new ways of designing games. The Sonic Rush trilogy is an example of how both screens could be simultaneously taken advantage of to present a singular image, guiding your eyes between screens and giving you a vertical look at the level as you blaze through. Blaze, that's funny. Okay, seriously though, the name is right. These games are a rush. At least until you encounter a bottomless pit as punishment for making a small mistake, because these things are everywhere. But otherwise, they're great games. I loved Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga for its whimsical tone, sense of humor, and timing-based battle system, and it received 2 sequels on the DS that built on the concept of using both screens. The first was Partners in Time, which let you take control of the brothers and their adult and baby counterparts at the same time, doubling both the screen space in which you could explore and the characters you can factor into battles. It felt pretty seamless, and it is a fun game in its own right, but I feel like Bowser's Inside Story managed to come up with a dual-screen gameplay mechanic that blew most people away. On the top screen, you control Bowser, while on the bottom screen you control Mario and Luigi inside of his body. That might sound disgusting, but the artist very cleverly gave everything a rounded and colorful look so that it wouldn't make you want to throw up the whole time, and instead the focus is placed on how Mario and Luigi can interact with Bowser's body parts to make him do things in the overworld. You have 2 separate adventures going on at the same time, and their adventures intersect with each other, like when you inhale enemies from Bowser's battles and allow Mario and Luigi to take them out and earn some experience. All the while, the game has the trademark sense of humor Mario RPGs are known for. It manages to surprise around every corner, tying every new idea back to its core concept of balancing the brothers and Bowser in their parallel journeys. RPGs were in no short supply on the DS, as you could imagine, but I specifically wanted to highlight an example of a game that thrives because of the Nintendo DS, and Bowser's Inside Story is a prime example of that. Perhaps the greatest simultaneous use of both screens and the stylus controls that I have ever seen on the DS was in The World Ends With You. This was another game that was frequently recommended to me, and I ended up playing through the whole thing for this video. I loved it, and it probably would have been a formative game for me had I played it as a teenager. The game is set in an alternate plane of existence parallel with real-world Shibuya, in which Reapers make players that have died in the real world take part in a sadistic game for a chance to be brought back to life, all orchestrated by the composer. The concept might seem esoteric as I describe it, but it is used as the setting to protagonist Neku Sakuraba's development, as he gradually learns to open up to other people through the other players he partners up with. It's a touching story accompanied by one hell of an action RPG, and it works because of the platform it was developed for. Here's how the battle system works. On the bottom screen you control Neku, and you drag him along the arena to avoid enemy attacks. Each pin you equip will call for a different input, whether it be rubbing an enemy to have them burst into flames, quick swipes to slash at an enemy, etc. At the same time, you have your partner character on the top screen. You use the D-pad to navigate your partner's combo branches, each with their own minigame that you have to play in order to fill your fusion meter. Provided you've been increasing your partner's max fusion level by getting the most out of Shibuya, you can continue to fill that fusion meter for an attack that deals a ton of damage. Though both characters fight the same enemies, both screens are in real time and you do have to keep track of them both at once. Your partner can go on autopilot after a short while, of course, but you still have to be careful. While this might sound like a lot to balance, the game guides you between each screen with the light puck, and you can pass it between each character by completing a combo on an enemy. By doing this quickly, you can both fill the fusion meter and keep both characters in good health at the same time. Also, there are times where you can just find a good dodge route with Neku while attacking with your partner, and you can develop strategies with pins to help turn the tables. This system has an incredible amount of nuance and depth, and both its nature, interactivity, and thematic relevance to the narrative were all born from the concept of the Nintendo DS. When this combat system clicked with me, I fell in love with the game. Shibuya was also the perfect setting for this game's narrative, as having been there myself, far away from friends and family, I can say that being lost in an ocean of people really made me recognize how small I am. For a story about a kid that feels like closing himself off, it was perfect to have him blend in with those crowds. But throughout the game, he learns to expand his world and open up to people, lest he let it end with him. The World Ends With You doesn't just take advantage of the Nintendo DS, the system is core to the experience in both gameplay and narrative, and it's something I think anyone should play. These are the kinds of games that validate the DS's existence as a console. The Zelda games released on Nintendo DS, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, are also two great examples of that. Zelda as a series is known for making players think outside of the box with the tools at their disposal, and the DS enabled them to do this in intuitive and clever ways. In essence, the DS stylus is a tool in and of itself, as it not only simplifies the exclusive method in which you control Link, but also redesigns familiar and new Zelda items to fit the Zelda formula, creating new potential for puzzles, combat, and more. One of its most memorable features was being able to write on the map, which is an incredible feature for a Zelda game, while also implementing that feature into its puzzles, and in Phantom Hourglass's case, attempting to speedrun the Temple of the Ocean King, taking notes of your path through each floor so that you can blaze through them later on. I have problems with both of these games, of course, but that's also just because I love Zelda more than most things, and I've made a full retrospective about these games if you'd like to hear some more detailed thoughts. In the context of a Nintendo DS discussion though, these games are an all-encompassing demonstration of how the DS could be used to make cool games. Since the DS was positioned alongside the Wii as part of an initiative to expand the medium's outreach, there were several games that took advantage of the nature of the hardware to do just that. Take Brain Age, for example. The games were created to help keep players' brains sharp through problems that test quick reaction times and memorization, influenced by Ryuta Kawashima's experience with neuroscience. Honestly, there's not much else to them. They're exactly as I described them. Brain Age 2 had a bonus minigame where you could play a relaxing version of Dr. Mario once you've completed an exercise for the day, as well as a multiplayer drawing minigame where each player would draw a prompt and vote on other people's drawings. I played both of these way more than the actual game, to be honest, although the latter was basically just an excuse for people to draw phallic imagery and farm votes because we thought it was the funniest shit we'd ever seen. There was also Nintendogs, which was another launch title for the Nintendo DS. You could take care of virtual dogs using the DS's touchscreen and microphone. In hindsight, these were extremely simplistic and casual concepts for games, and they're games that you could download for free on your phone these days, but in the days where smartphones didn't exist, these games were stupidly popular. Brain Age and Nintendogs both sold millions upon millions of copies, ranking as some of the best-selling games for the console. They had a broad appeal, just like a lot of the Wii's best-selling games. Just as Wii systems were being set up in senior centers, a lot of people that don't normally play video games bought a Nintendo DS to play Brain Age and Nintendogs. And you know what? I don't necessarily mind. If anything, I was entranced by the casual, portable nature of DS games, and some games managed to take advantage of that, while also creating fully fledged, enriching experiences in the process. Professor Layton and the Curious Village combined puzzles with a point-and-click adventure game to create an overarching mystery that you could work your way through on the go. Although it is really funny how sometimes you'll just be like, I want to go upstairs, and then the character will give you a math equation. For real though, this game was great. Scribblenauts also had bite-sized puzzles powered by this incredible engine that let you type in nouns and adjectives to spawn whatever object you could think of to solve puzzles, leaving each problem with multiple solutions, and honestly, I think it could do wonders for imagination and teaching vocabulary. In contrast to the garbage factory of free games that you see nowadays on smartphones, attempting to monetize every facet of their casual games, having to design a fleshed out video game for a casual market may not be as profitable now, but it certainly led to some memorable solutions. I am somewhat divided on how I felt about the Wii's motion controls in hindsight, and I felt that the Wii's best games made that control scheme optional a lot of the time, or limited their use of it. On the other hand, my favorite games on the DS often made direct use of the touchscreen and dual screen concepts, with those concepts being intrinsic to the kinds of games that thrived on the console itself. I even ran a couple of polls on social media asking how people felt about each console, with the poll results for the DS being far less mixed than the Wii, in which people either still held a palpable disdain for it, or they were picky about which Wii games they remembered fondly. I even specifically asked if they liked the motion controls in the Wii's best games, but I don't think that helped. Potato Cat summarized my feelings best, saying, "Some games' motion controls were created because they had the opportunity to be on the Wii, while others only had them because it was on the Wii. To me, it wasn't about gamers not wanting to stand up and move their body, it was about whether or not an experience actually warranted that, or needed to be built from that. While a lot of DS games align with the former statement quite well, as many games were born from its unique design, I feel like the second screen was often a great addition to games that didn't even necessarily need them. It was convenient for both displaying information and for adding a user-friendly interface to already existing games, so long as they didn't just shoehorn in gimmicks for no reason, because that certainly did happen. Still, I think the nature of the DS played a part in people remembering it more fondly than the Wii, even though both consoles were two sides of the same coin. For several years, the DS enjoyed strong sales and a healthy selection of game releases. Its sales only dwindled because of the release of the 3DS. Unlike the Wii, where the motion control fad died out by the end of its life, the DS reached the end of its life naturally, informing the future of portable and mobile games in the process. Many games on iOS and Android went on to be affordable, casual experiences that non-gamers could check out via the universal, malleable interface of a touchscreen. It also led to a lot of companies learning that they could rake in cash through those storefronts, but I don't blame the DS directly for inspiring that trend. One thing I do lament about the original Nintendo DS was its lack of features and upgradable firmware in comparison to the PlayStation Portable. The PSP had many multimedia features, a digital storefront, and the system and its games could receive updates. All things that the DS lacked, as it was intended to be a third pillar for Nintendo, alongside the GameCube and Game Boy Advance. It certainly didn't need these features in order to be successful, but I guess Nintendo decided that it wouldn't hurt to try. Before the release of the 3DS, Nintendo created the DSi, which had all of these extraneous features and more closely aligned with the capabilities and user interface of the Wii. The ambient music accompanying the menu even echoes that interface, creating a tranquil sense of familiarity no matter what you decide to play. The DSi sold over 40 million units in the end, and it did end up stimulating Nintendo's hardware sales at a time where the Wii was losing steam. But these days, it's nothing more than a curious piece of history. The DSi existed during an awkward transitional period for the technological landscape. Smartphones were just starting to pick up traction, but before they were widely adopted, there was all sorts of hardware coming out in this limbo period. The DSi had features like 2 cameras with all sorts of wacky filters you could put on your photos, a sound app that let you mess with audio recordings, including audio from SD cards. It had a digital storefront like the Wii that sold DSiWare, and it even had a web browser, which was previously something you could only use on the original DS if you bought the browser and a memory expansion separately. That said, the DSi swiftly lost relevance. If this was what the DS was from the beginning, I'm sure it would have been far more impressive, But the 3DS usurped all of its features just 2 years later, and rendered the DSi almost entirely pointless. On top of that, smartphones basically offered everything that would have made the DSi appealing to a casual, non-gaming audience. It was a gimmick console. And it worked. It probably wouldn't have worked out in the long term, but it worked for the 2 years it was relevant. Despite all of this, I loved the DSi. And it's not because of the DSiWare games you could download. It's not because the DSi XL's large screens are fantastic for playing DS games in crystal clear quality. It's because of how representative it is of an era that was short, but simple. Before new technology became standard. The last truly enjoyable years of my childhood, before things got complicated quickly. I got sick. Some of you know the story already, I won't repeat it again. For me, the DSi is a time capsule from the short time before everything changed, both in the larger context of technology and video games, and my life as I know it. It was also a constant amidst everything changing around me. These days, it has photos from before and during some of the darkest times in my life. I have pictures of the family dog when she was just a puppy, from road trips I'd take with my family, and from when my friends and I were still kids. I cherish these photos, and I've backed them up in case something happens to them, but every time I open the DSi home menu, I am greeted with a random photo from those times. Every time I want to play a DS game on this thing, I am met with a snapshot of those simpler times. Traditionally, I end these console retrospectives with a look back at a game that seems to perfectly reflect a console's circumstances. For a while, I thought about what game would perfectly encapsulate what I love about the DS, and how it enabled new ways to create things. At the same time, I wanted it to be representative of those simpler times I remember so fondly. Animal Crossing Wild World was something that I played the hell out of back in the day, and like I said in the GameCube retrospective, it made me appreciate having a routine in my daily life. Animal Crossing was a perfect series for a portable console, as you could pop in and see how your villagers were doing, do some work around town, and then carry the game around with you in sleep mode before opening it back up and playing some more. It was a game that encouraged you to play a little bit each day, rather than for extended sessions. It made a lot of tasks more convenient and fun to work on in comparison to the GameCube version. It had a ton of events throughout the year, unparalleled customization, at least until New Horizons. There are several features that remain unique to the game, and it introduced Brewster, my favorite character. For many, this game would be the perfect choice for representing this era. However, my choice isn't Animal Crossing. In fact, my choice isn't even a video game. It's a piece of software that comes pre-installed on every DSi system. Flipnote Studio. Simply put, Flipnote Studio lets you create your own animations. You can draw and paint with 2 colors at a time, each on separate layers. You can adjust the frame rate of your animation, record sound effects and audio, and copy, insert, and delete frames at your discretion. You could even take pictures and insert them into your projects as drawings, creating some horrifying results. Also, the audio quality was pretty bad.
Hello guys, welcome to my...
Flipnote Studio was extremely easy to use, and despite its limitations, it gave birth to one of the most incredible communities of creative people I have ever seen, simply because it enabled everyone to start making things. Alongside the launch of the program came the online service Flipnote Hetena, which allowed people to share their Flipnotes on a specialized social media service. You could comment on people's Flipnotes, add stars to show your support, and you could even purchase colored stars, which would in no way support the creator of the Flipnote financially, and even download Flipnotes and create spin-offs by animating over the existing audio, or just making dumb changes for fun. The service had problems, don't get me wrong. You could add an infinite amount of stars to a Flipnote, which led to a lot of star bagging and low-effort Flipnotes that would eventually crowd the most popular sections.
If you like Justin Bieber, add stars. Huh? Another one? If you hate Justin Bieber, add stars. What is all this?
Also, the spin-off system just led to people stealing and re-uploading other animations with the original creator left in the dust, resulting in people seeing the same Flipnotes every single day with little to no changes. You could at the very least lock your Flipnotes upon uploading them so that no changes could be made, which was pretty much the only safeguard from theft. Despite the mild drama this caused on the platform, it feels so funny to be talking about this stuff in hindsight because I have nothing but the fondest memories for Flipnote Hatena. Sure, a lot of the stuff on it was very much evocative of the era, which isn't really a bad thing. But the bottom line is that Flipnote Studio and Hatena both gave people an opportunity to create things and express themselves, just as the DS itself enabled game developers to do the same. These days, social media platforms are all homogenous. Whether you use Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, or Twitter, or maybe I should say Xwitter, they're all trying to operate similarly and uniformly in an effort to appeal to as large a market as possible. Flipnote Hatena was an example of a platform that had an identity, and something that stood for creativity above all else. There was no promise of monetary gain there, just a sense of fulfillment in completing an animation. When you launched Flipnote Hatena, you knew exactly what you were going to get, and you could create whatever you could imagine with the tools at your disposal. And it left a lasting impression on me when I was younger. It conveyed to me that I, too, had the potential to create something that would resonate with people, and it was all thanks to just how beautifully crafted the program's tools were for simplicity and accessibility. That's why I feel Flipnote Studio reflects my sentiments toward the Nintendo DS. Nintendo gave developers the potential to create one-of-a-kind experiences, and Flipnote Studio put those tools in the hands of your average DS owner. And in browsing Flipnote Hatena day by day, the service comforted me and inspired me, just as the DS itself did. At least, until they shut Flipnote Hatena down in 2013. The only constant in life is change, after all. Everything has to end sometime. Since then, Sudo Memo has kept its memory alive, running custom servers where people can share their Flipnotes as they did back then, and not long ago they uploaded a massive archive of Flipnotes from the Hatena days, totaling at about 44 million Flipnotes. Thank you, Sudo Memo, for preserving the hard work of so many creators. Nostalgia is a complicated beast. It is a powerful drug, and it can cloud your judgment, but it is also never a permanent escape. In looking back at the Wii, I found myself questioning its decisions just as much as I did enjoying them. But for some reason, I don't feel that way about the DS. I fully expected this retrospective to give me a new perspective on its position in the industry, but if anything, all it did was reinforce my love for it. And I'm more than okay with that. Sometimes, that's all you really need. To me, the Nintendo DS succeeded in doing pretty much everything it set out to do. It captured a new audience, it expanded on the possibilities for game design, and it just gave people a lot of fond memories. And while the DS's relevance has long since faded away, it was with me through some of the best and worst times in my life. An era of rapid change, all encapsulated by developers creating new kinds of games for an unorthodox platform. It played a huge part in Iwata's strategy for introducing new people to video games. The nature of the console unfortunately makes most of its games impractical for playing on other hardware, unless major sacrifices are made. But because of this, the best way to experience DS games today is still a Nintendo DS. And coming back to this thing immediately takes me back to a simpler time. Like the GameCube, it put the games before everything else. Like the Wii, it thought differently about how games could be made. It was an example of drastic change that ended up bringing so much joy into the world. Like Iwata said at E3 2004, better technology is good, but technology's not enough. Most importantly of all, the DS offered a platform for both developers and players to create things. Things that had never been done before, and things that opened people's eyes to new possibilities for self-expression. And at a time where I had no voice and it felt like life was out of my control, I needed those things. And here I am now. The DS in many ways informed how I view video games and self-expression as a whole. And it's part of the reason I'm here making videos today. And for that, I will always love the DS. So I had the urge to make this video as I felt like creating something that was pretty much just warm and fuzzy without any extensive critique to it, and I felt that the thesis for this video embodied that most as it came together. If I ever do another retrospective on a Nintendo console, it'll probably be the Wii U. And don't worry, that one will have a healthy dose of criticism in the script. For now, I wanted to recommend some stuff by Rasputin, as his videos also have that warm, comforting vibe. He's known for creating the Gaming for a Non-Gamer series on YouTube, and a while back he released a bonus cut of his wife actually playing Elden Ring and beating the game's tutorial boss, getting pranked by the liars around the game world, and just having a great time trying not to get smoked by everything. This, as well as many other exclusive videos, can be found on Nebula. Nebula is a platform that was built by and for creators, and by using it, you can directly support the people you like to watch most. By joining, you'll be able to watch my videos early, such as this video you're watching right now, as well as view bonus content and extended cuts of videos whenever I decide to make them. And this doesn't just go for me, this goes for every creator on Nebula. By watching my videos there, you are directly supporting me, as well as whoever else you decide to watch, be it Jacob Geller, Low Spec Gamer, Game Maker's Toolkit, Hello Future Me, and many more. Just in time for the holidays, Nebula is offering lifetime memberships. For a one-time payment, you can gain access to Nebula forever, all the while contributing to the expansion of exciting, creator-owned projects like Jetlag or the documentaries of Lindsay Ellis. You can even gift a lifetime membership to a friend if they've been wanting a Nebula subscription themselves. And the best part of lifetime memberships is that you'll never have to worry about price increases or monthly fees, which we all know are just the worst parts of streaming services in general. If you sign up using the link below, you can support me directly and gain access to Nebula for 40% off an annual plan, which is as little as over $2.50 a month. I hope you'll consider checking it out. As always, I've been Liam Triforce, and I'd like to thank you for watching.